this guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Presenting petitions, Présentation de pétition, the honourable member for Kitchener Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. An honour to rise to present a petition on behalf of folks that are quite concerned with methane-fired electricity generation, and they have an interest in moving to low-carbon energy sources. They start with the science, as they should. They note that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change notes that we need to be building no new fossil fuel infrastructure and reach net zero electricity generation by 2035. They note that while some people call natural gas a transition fuel, in reality it is a fossil fuel, and it is a methane producer, a very potent natural gas. It's a quite significant petition, so I'll move quickly through it, Mr. Speaker. In Ontario, they note that methane-fired generation is set to account for 25% of the province's electricity generation by the late 2040s, more than triple its current role. They go on to note that this increase in projected methane-fired electricity in Canada, and particularly in Ontario, indicates that the current level of carbon pricing of methane-fired generation does not send a sufficient price signal to incentivize the transition away from fossil fuels to low-carbon energy sources, and that the currently proposed clean electricity regulation process is too slow to address it. In fact, also it contains loopholes, which makes the issue even worse. They go on to call on the Government of Canada to make methane-fired electricity generation subject to the fuel charge component of the Greenhouse Gas Pricing Pollution Act. And if methane-fired generation remains in the output-based pricing system component of the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act, make it subject to increased carbon pricing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting of petitions, Présentation de pétition, the honourable member for St. Albert Edmonton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to present a petition in which the petitioners are calling on the government to amend the Corrections and Conditional Release Act and for Parliament to pass Bill S-281, known as Brian's Bill, which would do just that, such that convicted murderers would no longer be eligible to apply for parole after they served their minimum sentence. Rather, they would only be able to apply at the time of their automatic review, as opposed to the current situation where they can apply each and every year after their minimum sentence. This is in recognition of the significant trauma and harm that it causes to victims' families to be put through repeated parole hearings.
Presenting of petitions, Présentation de pétition, the honourable member for Central Okanagan, West Kootenay.
It's South Okanagan, but that's okay. Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud to rise here today to present petition E4673, a very important petition with over 5,000 signatures from across the country. The petitioners point out that Canada and the world face a biodiversity crisis with 1 million species facing extinction globally, that Canadian governments have consistently failed to meet their international commitments under the Convention on Biological Diversity, that Canada demonstrated leadership in the Convention on Biological Diversity in Montreal last year, in 2022, and the Impact 5 conference in Vancouver last year, and that the 2022 Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework signed by Canada sets binding international targets, and that the Minister of Environment and Climate Change stated his intention to introduce by early 2024 legislation that enshrines accountability for achieving these goals, and that such legislation should recognize and affirm Indigenous rights and jurisdiction in alignment with the UN Declaration on Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So they ask that the government introduce legislation in early 2024, this year, to conserve nature in Canada by implementing the Global Biodiversity Framework.
Presenting of petitions, Présentation de pétition, the honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and it is an honour to be able to stand in this place today and present a petition on behalf of Canadians who are raising concern for the actions of what is taking place in Pakistan. And specifically, these are Pakistani Canadians that point out that there is increasing political unrest that has led to the arrest of opposition parties and challenges for free and fair elections in that country. Specifically, the signatories of this petition are asking and calling upon the government and the House of Commons to ask the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development to immediately explore the feasibility of imposing sanctions on Pakistani military members responsible for these egregious acts. And they also ask the Government of Canada to use its membership on the IMF to require insurance of new and current loans and the extension of existing loans to the government of Pakistan to be conditional on Pakistan's holding of true, free and fair election. And finally, the signatories request that these measures be kept in place until freedom can be brought to Pakistan. It is an honor to stand and table this petition on behalf of those Canadians here in the House today.
The honourable member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Very much, Mr. Speaker, and I have two petitions to table today. The first petition is a petition signed by many Canadians that is concerned about Canada's response during COVID-19 to vaccine equity, knowing that future pandemics we have the potential of future pandemics coming forward. These petitioners call on the Government of Canada to support the WTO TRIPS waiver and to work harder to ensure that in future pandemics, vaccine equity is available to all people in the world. My second petition, Mr. Speaker, is calling on the Government of Canada to provide additional support to Ukraine. The war in Ukraine, the illegal war by Putin and the Russian Federation against Ukraine and Ukrainian people, is worrying for all Canadians. Of course, we have an enormous number of Ukrainian diaspora members in this country, and all Canadians want to see the government do everything possible to make sure that Ukrainian children are returned to Ukraine, to make sure that all supports that we can provide for Ukraine at this time are done. So thank you very much for that.
Presenting petitions, the honourable member for Courtenay Alberni.
Speaker, first it's an honor to table a petition on behalf of constituents of mine from Tofino and Ucluelet on the west coast of Vancouver Island. Mr. Speaker, they highlight that lifeguards watched over Lovekin Rock in Long Beach National Park, which is in Tloquit territory, in Pacific Rim National Park Reserve. They had a surf guard program for 40 years, Mr. Speaker, until the federal Conservative government cut the program in 2012. Now, Mr. Speaker, this is probably the highest concentration of people at any beach in Canada without a lifeguard. And emergencies are being often attended to by Parks Canada in collaboration with Canadian Coast Guard, West Coast Inland Rescue, BC Emergency Response Group, the RCMP, both fire search and rescue, volunteer firefighter departments in Ucluelet and Tofino, and even CFB Comox, Mr. Speaker. And we've had multiple deaths since the closure of this program. They're calling on the government to reinstate the Surf Guard Tower and Surf Guard services and extend the duration of the Surf Guard program to accommodate the growing number of emergencies as well as visitors at Long Beach National Park Reserve. There was a meeting in March. These petitioners are waiting for the results of that meeting, hopefully the reinstation of this program. Thank you.
President.